Welcome back to part 5 of our Retro Arcade Classics retrospective, covering the best of 1991 to 1995. In this episode, we're diving into some of the more niche, hidden gems from that absolute golden age of arcade gaming. First up today is World Heroes 2 Jet, released by ADK in 1994. The World Heroes series is pretty interesting. It was never quite a top-tier mainstream hit, but it always maintained a solid fanbase. This one is no exception. You can think of Jet as an enhanced version of World Heroes 2, though they did cut the deathmatch mode. It adds 3 new characters to the roster, Lubu, Zeus, and Jack. They also cranked up the movement speed and added a forward dash and backdash, which is exactly why it's called the Jet version. However, you can already see the early blueprints of super desperation moves for certain characters here, which really laid the groundwork for the next title, World Heroes Perfect. Overall, the quality is definitely a step up from World Heroes 2, but compared to its contemporaries like Samurai Showdown 2, Super Street Fighter 2, or the King of Fighters 94, it just couldn't quite compete. Still, it's a very solid classic in its own right. Next is Violent Storm, a 1993 side-scrolling beat-em-up from Konami. In my previous videos, I've often said that Konami's beat-em UPS were pretty terrible compared to Capcom's, but for this specific game, I have to give credit where credit is due. The pacing is snappy, and the hits feel incredibly impactful and satisfying. Even though it clearly borrows heavily from Final Fight, the execution is top-notch. The character movesets are varied, and the 3 playable characters each have distinct strengths, perfectly nailing that classic balance of speed, power, and all-around playstyles. There's bound to be one that fits your style. Honestly, it makes me wonder how a massive company like Konami, capable of making a masterpiece like Violent Storm, managed to pump out so many other beat-em-ups that felt like absolute garbage. The early 90s should have been a fierce rivalry between Capcom and Konami, but instead, Capcom just totally dominated. As gamers, that's honestly a huge shame. Then we have Karate Blazers, released by Video System in 1991, another side-scrolling beat-em-up. To be fair, back in 1991, this game was actually quite good and stood out against a lot of its competition at the time, like Crime Fighters or DJ Boy. It was a massive hit when it first dropped. However, while it had a lot of ambitious ideas, it fell short on the finer details. For example, the combat felt like it should have been impactful, but the rhythm just felt slightly off. The main characters have a ton of moves, but very few of them are actually practical or useful, which led to everyone just spamming Glenn's headbutt over and over. It gets a bit repetitive after a while. The graphics were also a little rough, and the difficulty was brutal. Sadly, it was a flash in the pan. It burned bright for a minute and then completely vanished from arcades. Players naturally gravitated toward games that were more accessible and polished, like the King of Dragons, Knights of the Round, or the legendary Captain Commando, which were all out around the same time. So, while Karate Blazers holds a special place in our memories, it's definitely a niche classic. Moving on to Mystic Warriors, a 1993 scrolling action game from Konami. This game had such a unique vibe for its time. On the surface, it's a run-and-gun beat-em-up, but it has these heavy RPG undertones. Konami poured a ton of effort into this one. The colors are incredibly vibrant, the soundtrack is beautiful, and the gameplay is so unique. It has everything: a leveling system for your special moves, critical hits, a life replenishing system, hidden items, secret weapons, a massive variety of magic attacks, and a command input combo system. The 3 selectable characters follow that standard power, speed, and balanced layout. Looking at it now, you could honestly call it an action RPG. Unfortunately, this style just wasn't what mainstream players wanted back then. People preferred fast, straight-to-the-point action and didn't have much patience for complex mechanics. Plus, the game was heavy on story text, and since it was all in English, barely anyone could understand what was going on, so it never blew up. Looking back all these years later, it's truly a stellar hidden gem. Next is Lightbringer, also known as Dungeon Magic, a phenomenal 1993 arcade game by Taito. It falls into the exact same category as Mystic Warriors. It features branching paths, hidden items, elemental weapons, level-up systems, and more. But it suffered from the exact same issue: a lack of immediate, high-speed gratification. If you were used to the straightforward, brutal fun of Capcom games, jumping into something like this felt jarring. These ARPG-style games require you to slow down and really absorb their unique charm. Back then, when arcade tokens were scarce and money was tight, nobody wanted to risk their coins on a slow burner. It wasn't until the emulator era, when we could sit at our computers, look up guides, read the lore, and pause whenever we wanted to check a secret route, that these deeper games finally got the appreciation they deserved. All things considered, Lightbringer is an absolute niche classic. Next up is Night Slashers, a 1994 beat-em-up by Data East. As we all know, 1993 was the absolute peak for beat-em UPS, meaning 1994 was a bit of a slow year for the genre. Arcade developers were already shifting their focus toward fighting games, which brought in quicker revenue. Even so, Night Slashers made a massive splash. First off, it featured a horror zombie theme, which was incredibly rare and eye-catching at the time. Second, the heavy, visceral combat blended perfectly with the character abilities, and the sheer amount of gore made it an instant hit with the youth. It was pretty tough, but that didn't stop anyone. The roster features the classic speed power balance trio, including Honghua Zhao, a Chinese Taoist martial artist who became an instant favorite. In short, it's a gorgeous, chaotic masterpiece with great action, intense gore, and flashy skills. It's a shame the arcade scene pivoted so hard toward fighting games right after, preventing night slashers from becoming an even bigger legend, but it remains a masterpiece among niche classics. Mortal Kombat 3 was released by Midway in 1995. The big selling points here were the digitized real actor sprites and, of course, the brutal fatalities. Personally, I was never a huge fan of Western arcade games, and I think most people felt the same way. The controls felt incredibly bizarre, having dedicated buttons for running and blocking, and splitting punches and kicks into high and low variations just made the game feel sluggish. Plus, back then, cabinets with 6-button layouts were incredibly rare around here, so its appeal was purely about the shock value. People just hung around the cabinet to watch the fatalities out of curiosity, rather than actually trying to master the mechanics. But that notorious selling point alone was enough to make it an iconic niche classic. It was one of those games where many of us felt, I don't get how to play this, but I definitely get the appeal of watching it. As long as someone else was playing, we were happy to just watch the show. Then we have Desert Assault, also known as Thunder Zone, a 1991 run-and-gun shooter by Data East. This game supported up to 4 players simultaneously and was a massive hit for a while. Data East always crushed it with their game music. They're the same studio behind the legendary Vapor Trail, and the soundtrack here completely blows games like Mercs out of the water. On top of being able to swap between all kinds of weapons on the fly, it featured a really unique 2-player co-op mechanic. If a player's health dropped into the red, causing them to move sluggishly and face imminent death, a teammate could actually walk over and support them. The injured player would hand over movement control to their teammate while they focused entirely on shooting, helping them escape danger. It was a beautiful mechanic Data East added to promote teamwork. It wasn't just about blasting enemies, it forged genuine camaraderies. For a teenager, that kind of design hit deep. It easily earns its spot at the very top tier of niche classics. Fatal Fury 3, Road to the Final Victory is a 1995 fighting game from SNK. Personally, I think this game surpassed every other fighting game of its era, with the exceptions of Street Fighter 2 and KOF 95. I remember being completely blown away by how premium the visual presentation looked. Even Street Fighter 2 and KOF 95 couldn't match its graphical texture. It was a massive leap forward from its predecessor. Along with the stunning visuals, the game retained incredible impact and rhythm, featuring a 16-character roster that even let you play as the bosses. Real, die-hard Fatal Fury fans usually trace their obsession back to this exact entry. Seeing a fighting game executed this perfectly made me feel like SNK was completely overtaking Capcom in the arcade market by 1995. It's not that Capcom's games weren't great, but the CPS2 systems were notoriously difficult to import and distribute at the time, giving SNK the ultimate advantage. While Fatal Fury as a franchise never became the mega hit that KOF did, Fatal Fury 3, strictly in terms of sheer quality, easily beats out 90% of the fighting games out there. It's a brilliant masterpiece that transcends being just a niche classic. And finally, our heavy hitter of the episode, Strikers 1945, the 1995 masterpiece by Sikio that claimed the crown as the king of 90s shoot-em-ups. What makes this game so good? I've thought about it a lot, and honestly, it's hard to put into words. What does a shoot-em-up actually need? The sparks flying off enemy ships when your bullets connect, paired with booming sound effects that give every hit real weight? The 6 distinct aircraft options, all based on real-world historical planes? Or maybe the beautifully simple control scheme of normal shots, charge shots, and bombs? Or that unforgettable background music? Honestly, it's hard to pinpoint. Other games had those elements too, but when Strikers 1945 put them all together, it just felt infinitely better than anything else. The difficulty was tuned perfectly too. Pros could flex their skills, while casual players could make it 3 or 4 stages deep just on pure reflexes without memorizing patterns, giving them a real sense of achievement. It was a rare win-win for both players and arcade owners. Players had a blast, and owners made a ton of money. See you next time, bye-bye.